This episode is brought to you by Ardan Labs Education. Sign up today to learn advanced concepts in Go, Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, and more. Visit ardanlabs.com/education for more information.
Welcome to the Ardan Labs podcast. Our special guest today is Amy Lindian, or also known as Capt'n Amy. And before I let her say anything, okay, Amy is one of my favorite people on Twitter because she works at NASA. And she has the coolest feed, and she's working on cool stuff that I'm going to let her talk about. And then if you're not following her after this, well, I don't know what your feed's about, but it's all wrong. Okay, Amy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Bill. Thank you for inviting me.
I was so excited when I reached out and you said yes. I was like crossing fingers and toes, and this is very cool.
Well, it's kind of cool for me because this is my first podcast, so I'm excited.
Ah, nice. Give everybody like the 2 minutes on what you're doing today. This podcast is about you, and I want to kind of explore your journey and how you ended up eventually at NASA and kind of what you're doing. So, like, give everybody the 2 minute spiel.
The elevator pitch.
Yeah.
Well, I am a Systems Engineer Supervisor. I lead a team of about 35 engineers, system engineers, and our mission is to make sure that the facilities at Kennedy Space Center are always ready, always mission ready. And we also provide support for launch operations, particularly Artemis, but also some of the commercial space flight that comes out of Kennedy. So that's my job. I get to hang around a bunch of really cool and smart people, and I get to see things you can't see anywhere else in the world. So that's in a nutshell.
I'm really ignorant on all this stuff. Okay.
Okay.
Like, so, I mean, other than the movies and the other stuff, I'm sure when you watch a movie, because my wife won't let me watch any movie with source codes because she's like, you're going to say that's all wrong. I'm sure you have those moments where you're just like, yeah, that's all wrong.
Well, it's okay. I enjoyed the movie anyway.
So, but you said one thing, and I want you to like expand on it. You said that the Kennedy Space Center is always mission ready. Like, what does that mean?
The whole center is dedicated to preparing and launching rockets, and that includes space probes and satellites and everything. Anything you can think of, we launch from there. And to do that, it takes a lot of people, and it takes a lot of different facilities to be able to do that, to be able to launch rockets, because it's not a simple thing as stand a rocket up, light the fuse, and it goes up. Like, for example, we have a particular building where we process the payloads. So some company builds a satellite that they want sent into space. They send it to us, and we take it to our payload processing area, and we do the final preps on the satellite, and which could include calibrations, it could include fueling it, and all that sort of thing. So, in one building, they're preparing a satellite. Then we'll move it to another building where it's integrated with the booster. So it might be stacked on top of a rocket or whatnot. So, and then from there, the entire rocket will be transported out to the launch pad. There's a lot of different systems that are required to launch a rocket. For example, to launch the Artemis rocket, we use gaseous nitrogen, gaseous helium, gaseous oxygen, liquid oxygen, and liquid hydrogen. So just those 5 gases alone, we have to be able to manage and deliver to the launch pad so they can be used for whatever needs they have. So all these buildings come together. All this facility is all dedicated to putting those payloads, those rockets into space. And there are about 10,000 people that work out there. I mean, it's all different kinds of jobs. It's what it takes to launch rockets.
Do you remember the show Buck Rogers? It was like one of my favorite TV shows when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Like, I figured that by now we'd have Buck Rogers technology into space. like airplanes. I mean, I feel like we're still, I don't know, 100, 200 years away from that sort of scenario.
Yes and no, because there's a lot of background stuff that would go on behind Buck Rogers, to make the spacecraft worthy, fix it and repair it. I mean, those things are complicated. And yeah, it seems like if you want to look at compared to what a sci-fi show is, it seems like we're behind, but getting to space is not easy. It's very hard work. It takes a lot of people to do it.
So one more question before I put you in the time machine and we start. My dad worked at Grumman when it was in Bethpage, New York, before Northrop and all that. In fact, I had 2 summer jobs there, one with the space group. But I'm going to talk about me, but it was cool, right? So my dad worked at Grumman, and I remember him one day bringing me home a book. Now we're talking like 1989, 90,
Mm-hmm.
with all the satellites we had floating around the planet at that time, and that was already like an incredibly complicated problem for throwing in it. Like it has to be 10 times worse than that. So my brain says space is so big that we still have, I don't know, thousands of miles of open space up there. But is it like that tight up there yet? Or
It's not that tight. I mean, I'm not an expert of what's orbiting the planet, but they have to track that. And here's a story that's kind of prior to when I went to work out at Kennedy Space Center. There's an experience I had in my prior field of work. We did some repair work, some modifications on a building that's up in the Panhandle. And this building was comprised of one 7-story building joined at the hip with a 10-story building. And the face of the building was angled at a 45 degrees, pointed towards the south horizon. And the 7-story building was the transmitter, and the 10-story building was the receiver. It was a giant radar, and their job was to track all the stuff that's in orbit around the planet. They track they could see something the size of a marble out to the moon. And they keep a database of all this junk. If an astronaut drops a tool while they're on a spacewalk, it's orbiting. They track that. They know what it is. So yeah, it's complex.
it's just like Buck Rogers should have had satellites all over the planet when they were coming in and out. That's all I'm saying.
I guess by then, we'll have pathways cleared. I don't know.
Okay, Captain Amy, we're going to unfortunately maybe throw you in the time machine because that's what we do. Because I want to hear your journey to kind of where you're at. And unfortunately, that requires me to ask some questions like, when did you graduate from high school? That's the first one.
I graduated from high school in 1977.
77. Okay, and I graduated in 87. So that's 10 years. Okay, so it's 10 years. I mean, that's not bad. That's not bad. 77. Where were you when you went to high school? What city?
I grew up in a small town north of Tampa, Florida. So it's podunk little town called Dade City.
So you're the one Floridian that lives here. Okay, I got it.
I'm not quite an original, but I've been here most of my life, yes.
So, okay. So you weren't born in that Tampa town then?
No, I was born in Havana, Cuba.
Oh, and okay. You were born in Cuba. When did your family get to the States then?
We left in 1961, I believe it was, right before Castro closed down the country. So my parents saw the writing on the wall and we left.
But you were a baby then?
I was a baby, yeah. I was only a year old
16.
when I left. Must have been 60, somewhere in there, 60, 61.
But you grew up, I guess, really your whole life in the United States. That's
correct. I have no memories of Cuba.
Okay, that's cool. One of the things I like to kind of explore is really like when you were in. Well, here's my first question. I'm going to ask this question because
okay.
I think everybody has this this story, even if you're not a software developer, right? You have this story. Okay. So clear your head. Don't think too hard. First memory pops in your head when you got to work on a computer, or you did something with a computer and your brain just went, wow, this is kind of super cool. Do you have that first thought, first memory?
And the first memory of my working on a computer or being exposed to a computer?
Even exposed. That first memory that pops up, being exposed to or getting your hands on a computer.
Well, being exposed to a computer, I was probably 12, 14, yeah, about 12. My father was managing a commissary that was producing food for restaurants. And he took us on a tour, and they took us up in the computer room, and they had this great big computer. It went wall to wall. And I remember the big, wide, green striped paper that had the holes on the side. But as far as the first time I actually got to interface on a computer was my second year of college. I took a course in programming Fortran. And where I was going to school, that had one of those great big IBM 360s. It took up half the floor of the student services building. And I had punch cards that I had to, write my programs and punch them into the key punch, and then take the cards to the window, and they'd run the program. And then I get a printout.
So you got to play with when I went to university, they had just, like in '88, when I went to this SUNY Potsdam up in state New York, they had just basically stopped the students playing with the punch card. Like, I had seen them in that room, right? But I never actually got to program on the punch cards. I'm going to get back to that though. So really, really cool. So I haven't had somebody on with the punch cards. I kind of regret not having that experience. I feel like there's a rite of passage with that experience, and I just missed it, for better or worse. I just missed it.
The rite of passage is when you work all night punching cards, and you've got a deck of a program that's this thick, and you're carrying it up to the window, and you drop it.
Did you do that?
Yeah. And it goes all over the floor out of order.
And not only that, you just lost your time, right? Because everybody had a certain time.
It was all time shared. Yeah.
Have you ever had I would imagine that if that happened to me, I would have a recurring dream for the rest of my life that I've dropped these cards.
No, what happened is an upperclassman, was laughing his ass off at me, and he showed me the trick. When you have a deck like that, you stack it up on end, and you take a marker and you mark a symbol on the deck, so that if they get out of order, you can just look at the markings on the edge of the deck and line them back up.
Oh, cool. I think everybody has dropped a deck at some point. Like, I think everybody has dropped a deck. I don't know. But see, I feel like I'm missing out now. That was it. All right. I'm going to get you back. I want to talk about high school. I kind of want to, I'm always interested in the things people were kind of passionate about or doing in high school, because as you already know, your life changes a lot throughout the years. And I find it interesting when the things you were doing in high school are you still doing now. I'm not. I was into sports and baseball. I was never really good enough. But I'm just kind of curious, what were your things you were interested in when you were in high school?
Well, as far as studies go, I knew that I was headed towards engineering or architecture. So I was taking all the advanced classes, the physics, the calculus, and everything like that. So academically, that was the direction I was going. Concurrent to that, I thought I was a rock goddess, and I was playing guitar and in a band and things like that. So,
do you still play? Can you still play the guitar?
There's a story there. See, in my 20s, when I had kids and all that, I came to the realization I'm a really terrible musician. I always have been. And so I gave up everything, sold all my gear. I mean, I was a gearhead too, so I had lots and lots of wonderful gear, and I got rid of it all. 3 years ago, got to thinking about it, and I decided I wanted to pick it up again. So I went out and bought myself a new acoustic guitar, and it just kind of snowballed from there. I've got, 3 guitars lined up on the rack back there, and we're in my music studio, and I've got my brand new synthesizer beside me. So I'm still a terrible musician, but I'm having fun.
How long did it take for you to kind of feel like you were back to where you were?
I'm not back to where I was because I don't have the motor skills that I used to have. I'm ancient, fingers, arthritis, things like that. So I don't think I've quite gotten back to that point, but it's, like I said, it's fun. I'm enjoying it.
I'm glad you did that. I'm glad. This is what I like to hear, right? Because you had a passion for it back in high school, and
Hmm.
we all let these things go for some reason or another. And I'm glad you got back to that. That's cool. Plus, you get to serenade Amy now, which is good.
You mean Anne? I'm Amy.
And
She's Anne.
oh my God, Anne, I'm sorry. She's gonna kill me. She's gonna kill me. And
For your Twitter followers, my wife Anne is brilliant. You should follow her too. She's wonderful.
I do follow her. I got a chance to interview her already
Yes, she
too.
told me.
Yeah. That's why I feel bad I messed up the name. So you love all those sciences you're taking in high school,
Hmm.
and you're into the music, but when you start to get close to graduating, I don't know what it was like in the late 70s when you were nearing the end of high school, because I know in the late 80s it was just assumed you went to college, but a lot of high schools in the late 70s were like colleges. And so was it like you were going to college and university, that was it? Like, what's going on there?
The expectation among my family was I was going to college. Okay. The high school I went to was a Votech high school. It was, I lived in a small town. It was rural, and they had a lot of vocational training because they knew that a good portion of their student body wouldn't be going to college. So they were training, there was a lot of agriculture and machine shop and things like that. Academics were almost like second second tier to all the vocational training. So yeah, I guess it was always considered that I'd be going to college. I mean, my parents were college graduates. My grandparents both had PhDs, things like that. So it's in the family.
What were their PhDs in?
My paternal grandfather was a doctor of law, and my maternal grandparent was a PhD. He was a professor of English literature.
So did you have already in your head where you wanted to go to university at that point?
By the time I graduated high school, I decided I was going to go to the local university, University of South Florida, and they had a really good engineering school there. So that was my intent.
No, that school's great. My daughter graduated from there a couple of years ago
Oh,
with an
really?
education degree. Yeah. The campus is beautiful. I loved the campus, and she loved going to school there.
That's great. Tell her congratulations then.
Go Bulls, right? Go Bulls. How
Yes.
do they do it like this? I don't even know.
It's like this, I think, or something.
Oh, it's like that. I don't know. I don't know.
They didn't have sports teams there when I was going to school.
Okay. So you're gonna go to USF. You're gonna get that engineering. What was your engineering focus on?
Electrical engineering.
Oh, electrical engineering. I always thought about going back to school to do the electrical, but then I was like, do I really want to go back to school? No. So it's like a pipe dream for me.
I have a story there too. So
How was getting that electrical engineering degree? Was it easy for you there? Was it, I feel like your classes in that rural town were probably not as challenging as you walking into USF.
yes, I felt the high school academics I had in high school didn't prepare me for university. I was in the top level classes that they could offer. I don't think it quite gave me everything I could have. You asked another question. How was it graduating from university? Are we to that point, or is
No,
there? Okay, we'll get to that.
I guess you're about to say you never finished that degree at USF, or you did.
That is correct. Yes.
So talk to me about that.
I completed 3 years of school there and then fell in love and had a family and couldn't balance school, and I had to work to support my family, et cetera, et cetera. So I took my technical training that I had and got into the field I'm in, or I was in. So the education didn't go to waste. I took it and went into a technical field, but I didn't finish school at that time.
So then what was that job that you took then?
Well, I was looking for any kind of job that I could get using my technical skills. I knew how to draw, I knew how to draft, and I had killer math. I'd done 4 semesters of calculus, differential equations, linear algebra, and all that kind of good stuff. So I figured I could use that somewhere. I answered an ad in the paper for a fire sprinkler designer. And I figured, okay, a designer, they want me to draw pictures. I ought to be able to do that. And I had no idea what a fire sprinkler designer was.
I don't even know either right now.
But I interviewed for the job and I fell into that career. And now I am a licensed fire sprinkler contractor. And so the career has been very good for me.
That's wild. So what was the job? What did the job end up being? You walked into a building and had to plan out where all the pipes were going to be and the sprinkler heads were going to be. And
Exactly. That for existing buildings and for new construction. I get the plans for a new building they're going to build. I lay out where all the piping was going to go, space the sprinkler heads properly, do the hydraulic calculation. That's where the math came in, because I was able to apply all my math there. Once the designs were finished, we get the piping, get the materials procured, and our installation crews would go install it on the building, either during construction or an existing building.
if that was my business and you walked in and you were able to do all of that and read blueprints and all that, I would have been like, I just hit the lottery.
Well, I didn't quite have that skill right away. I had to learn the skills, but I had the background for it. I had the technical training. I knew how to draft from school. I knew the math. And so, the picking up the details, how to do, space the sprinkler heads, how to put the pipe up, that all just came naturally to me.
It sounds like you enjoyed that job. You still certified today for this job?
Yes, I carry a contractor's license in the state of Florida. Yes, I enjoyed that job. It was different. It was not glamorous. I mean, nobody wants fire sprinklers. That seems to be the last thing on their mind when they're building a building. But I know if I did my job right and there's a fire, that could save somebody's life. And there's a certain satisfaction to that.
I wonder if do you know of any buildings where you did the design and planning and installation that ended up needing that system? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. And I've thought about that a lot. And typically, if you have a fully sprinkler building and a fire starts, only one or two head goes off. On an average, one head goes off, puts out the fire or controls the fire, and it doesn't really get reported. It's not like a major event. If the fire sprinklers go off, it's not a major event. If the building burns down, it's a major event because you have the fire. So I haven't kept track of all the buildings I've designed or I've been involved in construction. I haven't kept track of all that stuff. So I don't know. It could very well have been.
How long did you do that job?
I've been with several companies, but I started in 1983, I think it was, or 81. I started in 1981, and I took a 1 year leave from that, got into computer programming, but then I came back to fire sprinklers, and I did that full time for new construction. Well, I'm still in the fire protection game right now. I just do it a little bit differently, but being involved in construction, designing, and that sort of thing, I did that until 2020.
Wow. So
Nearly 40 years.
I get so many questions. Like, if you hadn't gotten that job, do you think you would have eventually fallen into something like that? Or was that just like this crazy milestone moment that
It was serendipity. At the time, it wasn't really planned. I needed a job. I needed to make money to, support my kids. So it wasn't a planned career. Once I got into it and I could see where the career could go, because I started basically as a designer from the beginning, and I did eventually move into management and was a vice president of a company, and managed a whole group of engineers and designers at one point. So um, it is a growth career. Anybody can get into it and grow into being your own owner.
So you said you did a year learning how to be a software developer, but but no, you went back to that
Yeah,
fire engineering. So tell me about what happened there.
I've been in the sprinkler business about 5 to 8 years, and when I first got into it, we were doing all the calculations by hand, with a calculator, but we didn't have computers, we didn't have PCs that we could do all the hydraulic calculations, and some of them got to be pretty complicated. And then after a while, we managed to get the company I was with had a Wang 2600 that we got, and we were running our hydraulic calculations on that. So I got very proficient on using it to do the calculations, and I started exploring some of the programming on it. And I got to know a woman that ran a local software house for Wang computers. This was 88, somewhere around that time. I was getting frustrated with fire sprinklers. I wanted to get back to, what I consider real engineering. And I got the lure of getting into software. So I went to work. I left the sprinkler business and I went to work for this lady at the software, and I was programming in Basic 2C on the Wang 2600.
What kind of programs?
I was doing some financial management for auto dealerships, how to calculate leases, sales, and all that kind of thing. It was a point of sale program plus lease plus total financing type program, all rolled into one. I was working on that. We were starting to get into developing a parts inventory management and tracking for the shuttle, life cycle management for the shuttle. So we were just starting to get into that, and the company folded, and I was left without a job, and so I went back to the sprinkler business, and I stayed there for the rest of the time.
But that's super interesting that you started working on some shuttle stuff right before all that.
Well, this was in Orlando, Florida, and there's a lot of businesses that support the space program.
Were you sad when all that kind of folded up that you didn't go and look for another sort of software job, or you were just like, okay, it's not for me either?
I tried to find a software job. I went out there, beat the streets a little bit, and I didn't have the certifications. I didn't have the degree in software. And after a short period of time, I realized I needed to work. So I, called up some of my friends in the sprinkler industry and went back into that work. So it was kind of a necessity, how you guys support your family kind of necessity. So a lot of my career choices were based upon supporting my family.
But I don't feel like you disliked, even when you went back, it wasn't like,
No,
were you disappointed when you went back? No, it was good.
no, I wasn't disappointed, because by the time I went back into it, the company that I went to was starting to get into CAD. So I got the opportunity to learn how to drive AutoCAD. And that was just totally exciting to run AutoCAD, be on the cutting edge of that.
What year was that? Because when I was working in the summers for Grumman in 89 and 90, one of my jobs was to put together this computer to run the AutoCAD for them
Mm-hmm.
and get all that up and running.
Yeah, I started at that company in late 88, I believe it was. And they were just taking receipt of, they had a couple of CAD machines that they were experimenting with. So they dove right in and bought everybody CAD machines, and we all went to training together. So,
I mean, those were expensive machines at the time.
yeah.
Like, I remember like one of the biggest towers I'd ever seen at the time.
Yeah, they were beasts.
Now, did you have a plotter? Did you have a plotter?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice.
We had one of the, I can't remember the brand name, 8-pin plotters. You know, it had the little turret that would spin around with the different colors that depending on what color you were plotting.
I remember seeing them in Grumman, and they were the size of tables,
Uh-huh.
like a couple big tables put together. Just they were just fascinating to watch. Did you get really good at it? Were you able to then? Was the idea you were able to even do design then in the AutoCAD?
Not to be unhumble, but I'm a damn good fire sprinkler designer. I'm really good with, now it's been a couple, 3 years since I've driven a machine, but I am really good at using CAD software. Where before I came to Kennedy Space Center, I was using some 3D modeling software. It was all object-oriented software, and I was really good at that stuff.
Talk to me about. So there's two things here that it's interesting to me. You said you're a licensed contractor. So is that something that was important to have with the fire sprinkler business, or is that something you just decided, I want to get this general contracting license?
There was a point in the early 2000s where I was a vice president of the company I was working for, and I was the branch manager of one of our branches. I was the license holder for that branch. I needed to go out and get the license so that all the work that was executed out of that branch operation was all performed under my license. And once you get a license like that, you don't let it go. You keep it up and do whatever you need to do to keep it live and legal. So, for an example, I still have the license, but I'm not working for someone. But to have a contractor's license, you have to have it attached to a company. You can't just be an individual with a license. So I do have my own fire protection company that my license is attached to. We don't do any business. It's just a host for my license.
Yes, you don't lose the license.
I don't lose the license. That is very valuable.
How do you have to take a test every 5 years to renew that or something?
It's every 2 years. We got to have 32 hours of CEUs and pay some money and send it in to the state, and you get your license renewed.
I had a friend whose father was a contractor, so he decided to get the license, and he had told me the hardest part was all the accounting, all the, I don't know, accounting or the business side of that test was like, at least for him, it was the hardest part.
Yeah, it can be daunting.
I want to know about NASA. I want to know how you get a job at NASA. Like, I remember being a kid in high school, okay, working in my room on the computer all day, and somebody had asked me, "What do you want to do?" And Bill Kennedy at like 17 said, "I want to work in a basement in NASA, just programming anything I can." But the whole deal for me was I'm in a basement, isolated from everybody else, because that's what you do. And then the thought of ever getting a job at NASA felt overwhelming. So I'm just really interested in that.
I run into that a lot, and I used to have that feeling too. NASA, it's just you got to be like rocket scientist smart to do that. Now that I've been there working at Kennedy Space Center, I can bust that bubble. And people ask me, how can I get a job at NASA? I'm not smart enough to do that. Let's step back a little bit, and I'll tell you my journey. In the the 2020s, 2020 comes along. I'm working as a designer, doing CAD design for another fire protection contractor, and the pandemic comes. Construction, the company I was working for did a lot of work for Disney World. I designed a lot of fire sprinklers in Disney rides. I did a design for a ride. It's called Ratatouille, and it's this like huge kitchen set. You're supposed to be the rat running through the kitchen. So there was this 20-foot tall ham, and I had to design where the fire sprinkler was going to sit in the ham.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting doing theme park design. But anyway, all the construction at Disney stopped because of the pandemic. And I was wrapping up some work that they were finishing. They stopped all the new stuff, but they were finishing up a job. And towards the end of 2020, that there was no more work for me, and they laid me off. Smart business move. I understand that completely. I'm a businesswoman. I've done it. I've had to lay people off for that reason too. So When I left there, I decided that, I live on the Space Coast. I live 10 miles from Kennedy Space Center. There's gazillion aerospace companies around here. There's Northrop Grumman, there's Boeing, there's Lockheed, all those, plus all the support industries, Harris and all the other companies. And I thought to myself, okay, I know how to drive a computer. I am pretty smart and technical. I can get a job in the aerospace industry. So I knew I could get a fire sprinkler job anywhere. I can walk into a company and they'll give me a job right now because of my experience. I decided I was going to get into aerospace. So I made it my job to find a job in aerospace. I would get up every morning, get dressed like I'm going to work, do my whole routine, report to my desk by 8 o'clock, and be searching for work in the aerospace business. And I came across this advert for a fire suppression engineer at Kennedy Space Center. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's me. I know this job. So, of course, I went and interviewed and got the job, landed it real quick.
Wait, let me ask you a question. What was the application process? Was it online?
Yes, the application was online.
Submit your resume online.
Yes.
And how long did it take them to call you back? Like an hour, right?
No, it took about a month for them to call me back. I think I applied in December. They called me in January, and I went to work in February.
Did you think, like, after a couple of weeks, I guess they weren't interested? I would think if they didn't get back to me in a week or two, they just threw my resume out.
I was applying to lots and lots of jobs, lots of aerospace jobs.
What other kind of jobs were you applying to?
I mean, there were engineering jobs and that sort of thing.
Just anything related to engineering?
Engineering and aerospace, or drafter, or designer, anything that looked like that.
So how did they get back to you? Over email? Suddenly you wake up one morning and you see an email from...
No, they called me.
Oh.
Called me up and said, hey, we're interested in you. You want to have an interview? I said, sure. I have to admit, I did have a leg up. I didn't realize it at the time, but as a contractor before I was laid off, I was doing some work at Kennedy Space Center, doing some construction out there as a private contractor. So I had been on the base, and I had interfaced with some people, and there was one particular engineer that I was interfacing with. He was their fire protection engineer, and I would work with him on projects that I was designing or managing and that sort of thing. So I knew this fellow. When I interviewed, he knew me and he knew my capabilities. So it was like almost automatic.
Did you know that this was the person you're going to be interviewing? Like, you make that connection right away?
When they set up the interview and they told me who was going to be interviewed, I was like, oh, I know him. So I knew who he was going to be in the interview beforehand.
So it had to be a pretty short interview.
It was about an hour and a half on the phone, and they offered me the job. So
you had to be super excited. I mean, if I had gotten the call first, I would have been bouncing up and down. And then
I want to come back to this about applying at Kennedy Space Center, but you say super excited. So yes, I was very excited to go on base and, get my ID and everything like that. And so I showed up my first day at work. I had to go beforehand to get badged and everything. Showed up my first day of work and spent a couple hours in HR, and then go report to my office building, and they show where my desk is and here's your computer, etc. And by the way, we have a meeting at noon we want you to participate in. I'm like, okay, great, whatever. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know. I'm not real sure what my job is. And I went to this meeting, and it was a briefing to tell a new group of trainees that get us started on console engineering training. That would be to start training for supporting launches on console. And on my first day, I'm sitting in this meeting, I'm thinking, what is he talking about? And then it all started clicking. I'm like, I just got a job where I'm going to sit in a control room during a launch. It was pretty amazing.
So you ended up not doing any sort of fire suppression? You ended up...
No, actually I did. Before I had the role I have now, I took on this role as a supervisor back in February of this year. Before that, I was acting as the fire suppression engineer, my main responsibility was the mobile launcher. You've seen the mobile launcher and online and whatnot. It's this huge structure that sits on the crawler, and they roll it out to the pad, and it's got the big gantry on the side of it. And they build the rockets. They roll the mobile launcher into the VAB, and they build the rockets. On the mobile launcher, there's a whole series of fire suppression systems up and down the tower. They're fire suppression systems and washdown systems. And those were all mine to maintain and test and make sure they were mission ready. I would test them, I'd go fix them. Working with craft labor, we have shops that do the actual work. I'm the engineer, I'm designing the test plans, I'm designing the repairs that need to be done, I'm designing their operational plans, how to do stuff. So yes, for the past 2 years, I've been a fire suppression engineer. That's what I've been doing.
I'm sorry, when you're testing these systems, you're turning them on, right? Like at some point you have to literally turn them on. And
well, we do tests with, we call it dry cycle. It's basically we're testing all the equipment without any water on it. So we're testing all the mechanicals, all the controls, and everything else involved with it.
Is there telemetry that comes off these systems too?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah? Like what kind of telemetry are you getting? Like water pressure?
This ties into my story about being a console engineer. In addition to being responsible for all the fire systems on the mobile launcher, I was trained to be support on console. We have, I'm talking in the control room. It's not the firing room where the launch director and all the firing room people sit. There's another control room in the same building, which controls all the utilities on the base, all the power systems, all the HVA systems, all the water systems. So, for example, on one side, they have this wall that's 30 feet long that has the entire power system for Kennedy Space Center illustrated on the wall. So they can trace down how the power is flowing, if there's an issue, that sort of thing. So we have console operators that sit there 24/7, 7 days a week, that are monitoring all the utility systems all over the base. And a console engineer sits there during a launch operation in case something breaks. You work with this console operator and figure out a solution, and we'll find a workaround. So if something goes wrong, we got to figure out what's going wrong to make sure that those 5 gases I talked to you about, make sure that we're supplying the 5 gases to the launch pad. Make sure the water that feeds the mobile launcher, that water is feeding the mobile launcher. We don't have a fire pump that's gone down or something like that. So yes, I've been doing double duty there. I'm a console engineer as well as fire suppression engineer.
Essentially, this is a room, it's just monitoring everything, right? There, if there is a problem, you got to start making phone calls. Is that?
Yes, quickly. And you asked about telemetry. I'm sorry I didn't get back to that. We have a tremendous SCADA system going on in the console, so that there's monitoring points for all the different kind of utility systems that are on the screens. And we can look at the performance of any particular piece of equipment, water line, power line, whatever, and see how it's performing. And it monitors whatever we define as the monitoring point, water flow, pressures, et cetera, voltages. And we have trending data, telemetry that we measure of when this is happening. So just as an interesting data point, I was having a conversation with a fellow today, and we were analyzing the performance of one of my systems just after the launch of Artemis 1. And the data points weren't matching up. Did this valve open 2 seconds after the launch or 4 seconds after the launch? And we're going back to look at the telemetry to see when this valve opened, when did it perform?
I think one of the fascinating things for me when the Apollo 13 movie, which is really Tom Hanks, and I really love that movie. But when you see the control room, what was always fascinating to me was the amount of telemetry they had coming off these devices. Because I've built software for 30 years, but it's only honestly, truly recently where I've started to even think about telemetry coming out of my software, like metrics, right? Like I've done very little of that, but I feel like an overwhelming amount of sort of telemetry and metrics coming into those rooms from NASA. Like they've been perfecting that for what, 60 years?
Yes. Yes. And, it's interesting. You mentioned the Apollo era stuff. I went down that rabbit hole one time because I got to thinking about how are they monitoring all the telemetry on the rocket itself and transmitting that back. Once the rocket launches, it's Houston's gig. We own it until it gets off the pad, then Houston owns it. But all that telemetry they're measuring on the Saturn rocket, how did they broadcast that to Houston? How did they encode it? What bandwidth were they using? How could they get all that data transmitted to Houston? And I found some interesting information. There's some people have done some good write-ups, explanation about how it's all packaged and how it's all encoded. And you got to consider the computer systems back then were pretty primitive.
My guess too is that it was all insecure, right? So like if somebody knew enough, they could probably intercept a lot of that data over the air.
Yeah.
I mean, why slow it down with encryption at the end of the day, I guess? I don't know.
I couldn't tell you what it's like now. I mean, I'm sure it's all encrypted. It's very secure. All of our systems are secure. Like, for example, all the network system that controls that, all the controls for all the utilities and the telemetry that I just described, that's all a closed network. It doesn't talk to the internet at all. It's a completely enclosed network because we can't have the possibility of anybody being able to get into our network and doing anything. So,
And I think I remember seeing the tweet that you just got that promotion to the project manager, right?
so back in February, I was offered the opportunity. The person that was in my seat had stepped away. She didn't want to be doing the job anymore, and so my boss reached out to me, and he's the fellow that hired me, and he reached out to me and said he was very pleased with what I'd done with getting the mobile launcher ready to go and supporting the launch and being there. And he offered me the opportunity, and I took it. The kind of stuff that I've been doing, focused on mission readiness and excellence of performance of my system, I can now work through all the engineers that work for me to do the same thing on their systems. And I think that's really important to build that kind of culture, that kind of ethic. What we're doing is supporting something incredible, and we got to be ready at all times to do it right.
And I'm really excited what's happening over at NASA now because they're talking about going back to the moon, talking about Mars, and I feel like there was a period of time, maybe a good 20 years, where NASA was almost like dead to me. They weren't doing these exciting things. And now I feel like there's all of this excitement again, again, Mars and moon.
It is a very exciting time, but it's not just NASA. And let me step back a minute. NASA serves at the pleasure of Congress. Congress holds the purse string, and Congress tells us what we're going to be doing. And there was a period of time after shuttle was winding down. Shuttle lasted longer than it should have, but there was no initiative, no plan to move forward. And they stopped flying in 2011, and for 20 years or 10 years, nothing happened. We kind of bumbled around. NASA kind of bumbled around with the Constellation project and then the Ares project, and those were all canceled. Finally settled on the SLS and the Orion project, which became Artemis. We're energized, we're doing things. But it's not just NASA, it's all the commercial partners that we're working with. We have SpaceX, the two iconic launch pads that launched all the Apollo missions and all the shuttle missions, 39A and 39B. Well, Artemis lives on 39B. That's NASA's pad. 39A is SpaceX's operations. They launch all their commercial crew program. Well, commercial crew program is a joint venture between NASA and SpaceX. SpaceX leases the land from NASA to launch off that pad, where NASA hires SpaceX to carry their astronauts to the space station. So it's a partnership going on. They do a lot of cargo resupply missions for us. They're building a starbase there. They're going to be launching the I can't even think of it, the big rocket that just blew up. Starship? Sorry, old age just hit me. They're going to be launching Starship off of 39B. So there's that excitement that's going on. We're working with SpaceX all the time. We're supporting them. Then, there's Blue Origins that's doing their development. They got a pad. They're developing their own rockets they're going to be launching. There's a new startup company that had a very almost completely successful launch it's a company called Relativity Space. And they're entered into the small to mid size booster market segment. Their rockets are 3D printed, almost 85% 3D printed. And they launched one of their first launch just a few months ago. And its success, first stage was successful. Second stage had a problem with the ignition on the engine, but to make it through max Q, and that was a success to get first launch of any vehicle to get that far. That's a brand new independent startup doing their own thing because they're entering the market. They see a business. So there's all this that's going on at Kennedy Space Center. So NASA's energized. Private companies are energized. Space is the hot new place to be. So it's a lot of fun to be out there right now.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. And as I was saying before we started the show, I have a home in Huntsville, Alabama, and I get to meet a lot of people there who work at NASA or in the Armory and all those companies. And and when I meet people, they're all excited about the different programs that are going on over there as well. In fact, this summer, the kid number six, the she'll be 16. She's 15. She'll be 16 soon. She's going to do a week of space camp in Huntsville.
That's really cool. Space camp is cool.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I bought her the space camp, and then I'm like, why am I not going? They take adults. Have you done the space camp? Do they have that program up there in Cape Canaveral?
No, they don't. I think they did it one time, but I think it's all in Huntsville now.
Oh, all in Huntsville? Yeah, she's going to do that the week of July 4th.
Wonderful. That is neat.
She could be the next engineer. So we're really trying. And then she's going to do 2 weeks at George Mason doing some software development programs this summer. I don't know. She's got like 3 weeks of this stuff over the summer. So
that's wonderful. What's really interesting, when I went to work there 2 years ago, the workforce was stratified. And let me step back a minute. I didn't really clarify a couple of points here. I don't work for NASA. I work for a private company. Well, it's a publicly held company that has a contract to support NASA. At Kennedy Space Center, there's probably 10,000 people that work on the base. Only about 2,000 people actually work for NASA. Lots of companies that work on specific contracts to do certain things. My company has the contract to provide the base operations and spaceport services, or BOSS contracts. By the way, they're really heavy on acronyms. Everything's an acronym.
Of course. Until you start getting next gen, right? Once they use all the acronyms up.
The workforce out there. When I started working there, shuttle had been shut down for almost 10 years. There had been slow progress working towards Artemis. The actual Artemis rocket was being built in Michoud in Louisiana. Kennedy was doing a lot of upgrades, getting prepared to be able to launch Artemis. So there's a lot of infrastructure that had to be built up, changed. They had to build a new mobile launcher, et cetera, et cetera. But the workforce had been drastically reduced from shuttle. When Artemis started heating up in 2020, when things were, we knew the rocket was coming in 2021, they started hiring new people. So there's this gap in in the workforce of people that are closer to retirement left over from shuttle, and this whole cadre of young engineers and scientists and everything that have come in, and it's really fascinating to see them grow into their positions to run this program.
So you said you wanted to get back to applying to NASA, to not have this idea that, you had to be a Mensa level human being to apply.
Yes, I'm glad you brought me back to that. Okay, I'm a fire protection engineer. I work with different kind of tradespeople that work all over the base. I interface with plumbers, electricians, HVAC technicians, all different kinds of trades of people. My point is, there's lots of work for everyone out at Kennedy Space Center supporting NASA. It takes a lot of people to run this stuff. We have, people that clean the buildings. We have people that are administrative types. We have a lot of accounting types. It's a small city, and people think that I can't be a part of all this because I'm not a rocket scientist. No, take your talents, what you're good at. If you're a computer programmer, I got needs for computer programmers. I need controls engineers right now. I guess my point was that there's space for everybody out there supporting this whole bigger than life journey that we're all on.
I love that message because I think that, I think at least a lot of myself, right? You just think like I can never work there, but you're right. There's just a ton of different opportunities. And I try to tell people all the time, even if you don't check every box, don't worry about it. Just apply. Maybe they see your resume and they have something they haven't even published yet and it fits.
We're not rigid at, you got to have this box checked, this box checked, etc. We look at skills, we look at experience, and we put that together to see how that fits in our team, in our mission. So, like I said, we hire all different kinds of people.
And imagine if you hadn't taken that fire suppression job back in the late 70s, where you'd be now.
Here's an interesting story. When I was a kid, that was during the Apollo era. I watched the Neil Armstrong landing on the moon, taking the first step live when I was a kid. So yes, I'm that old. As a kid, a couple of times I took scouting trips to Kennedy Space Center. We used to go there for, exploring the place. I have a picture of me, I found it recently, a picture of me standing just off of one of the launch pads. Well, quarter mile away from the launch pad, as close as you could get at the time. And in the background is one of the Apollo rockets sitting on the pad.
Wow.
And the best I've been able to estimate, it was probably 14, maybe 13 that was sitting on the pad. So I got a picture of me with the Apollo rocket behind me in the background. And now I have lots of pictures of me with the Artemis in the background. So part of my job, I was doing a lot of work on the launch pad itself, right next to the Artemis rocket. So it's kind of neat. It's kind of a end-to-end type thing. Yes.
Yeah, full circle moment. Looks like your destiny.
I guess.
All right. We've got like another 10, 15 minutes. And I've been asking all my guests this question because it's become a very, I think, overwhelming thing this year.
Okay.
And it's around AI and Chat GPT. And I've been asking everybody kind of what their thoughts are. Are they positive or negative on it? Do they see this technology maybe getting more integrated into the work they're doing? Do you have any thoughts on this? Because it's kind of taken over, at least if you're in tech, it's taken over your timelines and every conversation.
I'm not that familiar with it. I'll tell you that much. Yeah, I read online that about ChatGPT, and tells me all about it and that sort of thing. But I'm not involved with it, so I don't have extreme knowledge of it. I think that it has its place. I don't think my very uneducated impression is that it's in its infancy, and it's got a ways to go before we can rely on it as a primary source. I don't think that it's even being touched at Kennedy or anything like that, because they're so, everything has got to be very critical. It's got to be analyzed back and forth. So I don't think they would be used out there. But again, I'm highly uneducated about AI and Chat GPT. I think it's got a place, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to me to see how far, at least in my lifetime and or my career, which I really want to retire in 5 years. Um, where it touches all of that. I mean, people that think it's gonna, it's the next internet kind of thing. It just changes the world completely. And there are others that are just like, it's a tool, and it's going to be a very powerful tool, like Google search has been, and maybe that's kind of where it stays. Okay, Captain Amy, we're out of time, and I cannot express the thanks I have for you to spend all this time with us and talk about your career. Super interesting how you kind of landed in the fire suppression and the construction and all that level of engineering and CAD, and it kind of prepared you for kind of the work you're doing now, and that exciting work you're doing now at the right time, right? Like timing is everything.
Timing is everything, but having an intention is very important too. And can I add one small little short story?
Yeah, you got time. You got time.
We talked about earlier that I went to school, studied electrical engineering, and I had to leave to go to work. 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, I returned to school to finish that degree. I'm still in progress. I'm doing it slowly online at night when I can do it, but my intention is I will finish that degree. It's kind of my motto these days. It's never too late.
No, it's never too late for the things that you want to do. Let me just ask you a question there. Has this always been something that's kind of bothered you in the back of your head that you didn't finish it? Like, tell me the motivation behind doing this.
It's always been kind of an unfinished business in my mind, and there's a lot of other stuff involved that I won't get into, but it's always kind of nagged at me. I mean, I got a successful career. I'm doing well. I'm doing well in my game here. I don't need this degree. I want this degree. And I finally got myself to the point where I overcame all the mental blocks that I couldn't do it, and I started back, and I'm doing it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's really good. That's really cool. Where are you doing? Are you going? No. Did you get back to USF, or where are you finishing?
I am currently enrolled at University of Central Florida in Orlando.
Okay, UCF.
Yeah, UCF. I'm kind of in a transition point right now, trying to work through getting the right classes at the times that I can actually go to school, because studying undergrad courses, I'm not going to get into that. I'm in a transition point here, working through, taking the summer off because I've been on steady. Actually went through the fall semester last year while I was launching a rocket. That was slightly insane. But I'm taking the summer off, working through some details with the schooling, but I'm currently at UCF. That's my path at the moment.
And number one graduated from UCF, so. Yeah, that was a nice. I like that school too. I think USF was more of a college-y campus for me, but UCF was cool.
When I went to USF, the campus was still very new and it was wide open. It's not anything like what it is today. UCF has got a very pretty campus, but it's unusual.
It's the second largest, I think, school in the country. Like 60,000 students or something.
Some
crazy.
Amazing amount of students, yes.
Yeah.
I started back at a community college and then transferred to UCF in January of this year. I just finished my first semester there. I had to go to orientation since I was a new student at UCF. Here I am, a 64-year-old woman sitting around with all these 18, 19-year-olds in orientation.
While the student body goes up on stage and starts yelling, "Go Knights," And you're just like,
Yes.
I really don't care about the nights.
But it was a special experience though to be able to walk around the grounds and say, I'm back, I'm here, I'm a student, a university student. So
Yeah, no, it's amazing. That's awesome. You're taking all your classes online, right? You're not that close to you. Are you? No, you're not that close to UCF.
about a 45-minute drive.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, it's not
okay.
too bad. Up to this point, I've been taking them all online, and like I said, I'm trying to work out the details to get classes that I need. And of course, getting 40-year-old college credits accepted is it's been a journey. So
Wow. Are they accepting them? Because that was my first thought was, I guess they're like, I don't know what the word is, but
expired,
expired. Yeah, that's the word.
moldy.
I was thinking stale, but that was like the wrong word.
Yes,
So,
stay. There's been some negotiation. There's been some discussions about, reviewing the syllabus of what the coursework was at the time compared to the coursework now. I mean, things like calculus. Calculus is calculus. It's been the same since Sir Isaac Newton invented it. So it's like I said, there's been some negotiation, and some of the required coursework has changed because the curriculum changed. Electrical engineering in the late 70s is a little bit different than electrical engineering now because technology has changed. So it's, like I said, a journey.
they should just give you 60 credits on life itself, life experience.
Yeah, I guess they can't charge the credit hour fee on that.
Here's a check for the 60 hours of my life experience. That's awesome. So I have something to look forward to on Twitter when you tweet your degree.
I did, as part of the stepping stones to get into UCF, because my credits were so old, the advisors told me to go to a community college, what they call a state college, but it's a local college, and get an AA first, and that would transfer easier into UCF. So that was part of the stepping stone. So I got my AA in December.
Did you go to Valencia for that?
No, I went to Eastern Florida State College.
Okay.
It's in Cocoa. I got the degree, and it was time, to get commencement and all that. And I thought, I don't, this is only a stepping stone to where I want to be. And Anne she talked to me a little bit about it, and I realized I earned this thing. So I am now a college graduate, and I walk the stage, I got the little cap and gown, and I got the whole deal. So
I'm glad you did that because I didn't walk after I graduated, and I still regret it to this day, and you can't go back. So I'm glad Anne pushed you to do that. That's cool.
I am too, and I've thanked her for it. I mean, in the moment, beforehand, it didn't seem like much to me, but in the moment of doing it, it meant a lot.
And you get to walk one more time
Yeah,
soon enough.
yeah. Well, who says that's the end? Who says that's as far as I go?
Hey, you'd be the next legacy PhD in your family.
Yeah.
That's it.
When I'm 90 years old.
Or whatever. It's never too late. You said that.
Exactly.
Never too late. Okay. Captain Amy, we're out of time. This was so great. For anybody listening to this that wants to reach out and ask you questions, what's the best way for them to reach out to you? And we'll put this in the show notes too.
I would say at this point, find me on Twitter. That's my main presence. I'm also on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn and connect with me there. My account at Twitter is open, but I keep my DMs closed. So if you reach out and connect me on Twitter on the main, then we can connect and talk in the DMs. I am at Capt'n Amy, CAPT''N Amy. So it's not Captain Amy, it's Captain Amy.
And that works because I did a regular tweet to Captain Amy, and then she opened up her DM, and I was able to talk to her. So it works.
But again, I also have a presence at LinkedIn. Search for Amy Lindian, and that's my professional account, and I'm open there to talk and whatever.
This was great. All right, so this is Captain Amy and Bill signing off from the Ardan Labs podcast. We both hope to see everybody again real soon.